I guess I can't put this off for any longer. Sorry about the wait, but here it is. After starting this video series looking at Isekai to figure out exactly what this modern trend has become, specifically the tropes that have come to define what we call Isekai today, how its popularity is sustained, why there are so many thrust out each season, why is there such a landslide of light novels, and why are so many authors writing these on self-publishing platforms like Shosetsuka ni Naro and Arcadia. There was always this shadow looming on the horizon of what started it. Not the idea of a person going to another world for an adventure, but of these otaku types being transported to a fantasy world, given amazing powers, building some harem type deal, and being the only person who reasonably stands a chance to save the place, or otherwise becoming the focal point of that entire world. Older franchises that fit the definition of isekai are few and far between before this point, but this was sort of the series that ignited the fire, so to speak, with a lot of web novels coming out as the anime and light novels of this took off. So before we get into it proper, just a refresher that this is a video series discussing why an isekai is an isekai, finding out its contributions to pop culture, how it fits industry trends, and what, if anything, it pioneered. I'm not looking at the merits of a franchise, but rather its cultural significance. And with that out of the way, welcome to my first foray into Sword Art Online. God, I've been dreading this. So, Sword Art Online, often considered the granddaddy of the modern isekai genre. Yes, that's a distinction worth making this late into the game, but why is that? If you kinda squint your eyes at the timeline, it sort of adds up. Sword Art Online hit with an anime adaptation in summer 2012 running through winter, with most of the big influential series spreading their wings that same year. Konosuba dropped in December 2012 on Shosetsuka ni Naro, but Re:Zero hit in April on that same platform a whole season before Sword Art Online aired on television. Hell, Overlord started in 2010, so there's no way Sword Art Online's anime fueled that, right? This is where the single focus of many viewers simply pointing to an anime and saying that's the de facto root cause is a little misguided. Sword Art Online's popularity began long before the anime was actually released, with the series launching on Kawahara's website as a web novel way back in 2002, where it picked up a following. And I just realized there's a decent chance Sword Art Online is actually older than a chunk of my audience. That's sobering. Having a 6-year run there before being devoured by a publisher is a bystander of another of his works winning a competition. By 2009, the first volume of the light novel hit the market with some success. The manga adaptation followed the next year, showing a solid following for the series had been picked up enough by fans that the publisher was confident in releasing the story in a new format. By 2011, the series was regularly hitting 100,000 units moved for each light novel volume. By the time the anime hit in 2012, the light novel was the top-selling series that year, and consistently hitting top spots since 2014. Was Sword Art Online popular? That's a stupid question. If the numerous volumes of different light novels, 10 manga adaptations, the I Can't Be Bothered to Count series and spin-offs for anime, video games, music, and merch didn't tip you off, people like this franchise. The timeline makes it ripe for inspiration, with many of the series coming out in the following years using tropes this series established, both good and bad, as well as strikingly similar premises. With the novels, manga, and anime selling well, while series like Re:Zero, Konosuba, Overlord, No Game No Life, and the Saga of Tiny the Evil were still being developed, the idea of an otaku leaving their life behind for one filled with adventure, magic, and conflict being uniquely conceived strikes me as odd. Granted, the call to adventure is a pretty fundamental story trope, but each of these following the pattern of forceful abduction into another reality, held there by a higher power, and becoming the main character in that world is what turns this from coincidence to clear inspiration. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's pretty clear when viewing the wider context, whether direct or indirect, it's felt. Alright, SAO, what I and many others would consider the transition into modern isekai. This is where a lot of the fish out of water, mystery, and story-driven adventure scenarios fell out of favor, and focused more on the character-driven narratives. And by that I do mean the protagonist specifically. Less how and why, and more what is the person doing there. Let's run through some tropes and see how these first took shape. So a guy ends up trapped in a video game world where he can't log out, and is basically living there as though it were another reality. This would also be the rise of the heavily video game-esque systems many of these isekai fantasy worlds use. Skills, magic, items, and such all having names and MP use, and being learnable by the hero rather than them remaining separate from that world's rules. If you think back, many of the characters in older isekai didn't really gain much there besides character growth. A major part of isekai is the invincible troop of comrades the main character tracks, with himself being the central badass linchpin holding the dynamic together. But it takes time to develop here, which is a trend I've seen fall to the wayside the further back I look in isekai. Meaning, as a general rule, the older the isekai is, the more likely it is to focus on these small details like forging a believable team dynamic, interpersonal relationships, and character development. Or, in other words, things that make an audience identify and relate to a character besides they can flex their muscles the most. Though it is an anime still, which means the main girl is ideal waifu bait. Oh, thank God, at least that hasn't changed. And while this series gets a bad rap for being a harem wankfest, sorry, one of the reasons why this series gets a bad rap is for it being a harem wankfest. It at least builds it up rather than dumping it off on the protagonist as a gimme like many other more recent isekai franchises do. Mao-sama Retry, Okasan Online, Choyoyu, Smartphone, and even Tensura throw these easy groups built with little effort on the main protagonist's part, amounting to essentially saying the right things in a dialogue tree. At least in an older series like this, we see actual conflicts between the characters and solid arcs, rather than a goal checklist slowly being accomplished. But while that journey's different, the end result's still the same, and leads to the easy conclusion that isekai is simply being streamlined. Further backed by its continued success, reinforcing that audiences don't much care about that aspect of the series. At a glance, SAO fits the tropes of a modern example. A dude in another world, insanely powerful, making said world revolve around him, and building a harem. But the pacing of those events means the world. It takes SAO multiple episodes, or even an entire season to hit those beats. After looking at so many isekai franchises in this video series, both older, Hallmark, and recent ones, I see where the disconnect comes from, why more analytical and critical viewers show disdain for the genre, and why more typical fans enjoy these shows. If you like deeper meaning behind character actions and story driven by those actions, isekai feels devoid of merit. However, if you're watching isekai for its action, adventure, and cool shit, that's still very much present. And I wouldn't say either of those approaches to enjoyment are wrong, just varying degrees of pretentious and possibly ironic. So, what was Sword Art Online's cultural impact? What did this series do for isekai as a genre, since it sort of predates the Western notion of it? Well, SAO sort of took the entire anime world by storm. By 2017, the series had an estimated 20 million light novel volumes in circulation, consistently hitting the top spots in popularity polls, and multiple anime adaptations running 2012 to 2014, and continuing in 2018 onward at this point. The series has been referenced in other anime, and even more surprisingly in Ready Player One, a 2018 film by Steven Spielberg. So pretty damn far-reaching and maintaining a lasting impact, with the series running officially from 2009 to this day. In terms of raw sales, it's ranked among the top-selling media franchises in Japan, just below Overlord and coming back from a 4-year anime hiatus. Like almost 2 billion yen for all media and merch sales, which is at least $1 or something. But that's enough jerking this series off. What did SAO do for isekai specifically? Well, it's the starting point for the current boom. To this point, isekai was few and far between. And however you want to define isekai, specifically the idea of a person going to another world for an adventure. Series like Dot Hack, Inuyasha, and Digimon were popular, but as I mentioned, there was less focus on the other world in those series, as the characters and their arcs were more important as presented. It wasn't so much, look how cool this virtual reality world is, and more, we're here and this is how we feel about it. SAO puts its world and that the characters are trapped there to the forefront, adding stakes to that fact through permanent death. It's arguable that the setting and premise were more engaging than Kirito himself, so while not being directly copied, the inspiration is still clearly felt, resonating through the medium today. It told imaginative creator types that they can tell a story about a crazy world with an easily projectable protagonist, and audiences will eat it up. I'll stress, this isn't the first isekai, but it's definitely one that would greatly inspire the direction of the genre. If you want to point to a specific franchise that shaped anime the most in the last decade, it's Sword Art Online. And whether that's for better or worse, I'll leave for you to decide. Though, clearly it's worse off. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon where you can pick up some extra perks like voting on what I do next. And speaking of Patreons, I'd like to give a special thanks to Tammy Silverwolf and Volcarona for their continued support. Thanks for watching.